G'day guys, my name's Chris, aka iRidetas, and in today's video we're going to continue our walkarounds of bikes I've built for myself. And today's video is about the XVS650 budget bobber build that I built on my channel. This is another of my forever bikes. I love this bike, I have no intention of selling it, and I've done a fair bit of work on it as part of the channel. If you want to check out the build more in depth than what I'm going to talk about, I'll list the playlist down below. But let's get down to business. We'll go front to back and then I'll fire it up so you can hear it roar. It's a great bike, I absolutely love it, and I hope you get something out of this video. Okay, so up front we've got some JCC, Justified Custom Cruisers, John O'Bab. I don't think the company runs anymore, but we've got some of his 4-inch extensions. They are great. I had some trouble with another company. The guy's fork extensions didn't fit. He got real aggressive, tried to bully me, and sort of bottom line is he wanted me to sort of accept responsibility for them not fitting. So you can imagine how that went. So ultimately, this is the second set I've had on this bike, and these are JCC, and they are great. I really like the look and I like the stance. It lifts up the front and gives it a little bit of a Frisco look, which is what I'm going for on this bike. One of my favourite features is the headlight stack. On the bottom, I've got a 5¼ inch bait style headlight, and I got that from the thirdgear.com.au. And up top, I've got a 4.5 inch amber headlight in the bait style. Again, I got it from thirdgear.com.au, and they're wired together. So low beam on the switch actually runs this at high beam, and then high beam on the switch actually runs that, turns that down to low beam and runs that at high beam. And yeah, it looks really cool. I'm really happy with it. I think it suits the era of the bike that I'm going for. And this patina bike, I'm sort of trying to send it back in time and give it a sort of very retro vintage look through all the modifications that I've done. From there, guys, it did have fork gaiters on it, but they split. And I've got fork gaiters on a bunch of other bikes, so I decided to do something different, and I painted the fork bottoms, and then I roughed them up and aged them, distressed them using some sandpaper to, again, just add to that patina look. I made the headlight bracket, I welded that up. It's just basically a T, and it's quite thick to support the weight and prevent vibration. Down the bottom here, you've got a gremlin bell. You've got some brackets and some pipe that I welded up as highway pegs. They do work, they're not amazingly comfortable. The bike is a little bit too short in its length to really be comfortable with highway pegs, but I certainly like the look of them, and I enjoyed welding them up. And I just used some caps that come with the purchase of handlebars, and I just knocked them in there with a mallet just to finish them off. It also protects the indicators if I bump it or if the bike falls over. On the brake lever, you've got a skateboard wheel, just as a nod to the skating that I used to do in the past. I haven't ridden a skateboard for years, and I don't intend to, but I certainly just had those wheels lying around, and I've put one on this side and one on the other side, just as a nod to something that I used to absolutely love in the past. I've taken the head covers off, and I've given the jugs a spray paint in heat resistant or pot belly black. And I've also given the intake manifolds a spray paint just to neaten them up. I've cut speed holes in a few of the covers on the bike just using hole saw, and this is a Frankenstein exhaust. It's the stock headers cut, gutted, and then the cocktail shakers have been welded on, and then it's been patinaed using a couple of different techniques. I welded that together in the end, and I've never had an issue with it. It's absolutely awesome, and it sounds great, and it's rock solid. Again, it's one of my favourite features of this bike. Got some different heat shields on just to protect my feet and my legs when I put my legs down at the traffic lights, etc. It does run quite warm, so ultimately it just helps protect my boots and my legs by having those heat shields on. I used a couple of different patina techniques using paint and sandpaper on the side covers. They are ABS on this bike, so I couldn't actually rust them. So I've used a couple of different strategies to just age them and distress them. I've also, as per usual, got my bottle opener, which is just a nod to the rat rod look. I put it on quite a few bikes and I like them. They look great. They're pretty cheap on eBay. They look really cool. Just to complete the look with the pillion pad, I have welded on some old pegs that I had. They came off some highway bars that I think came on this bike or the XVS650. So I cut them off and I welded them to where the top mount for the stock fender goes. I have had my partner on the back of this once. It's pretty cramped, but it works. It's not something that you do anything other than just a quick trip down the road, but certainly it changes the look of the bike. It also gives me somewhere to mount bungee cords and things when I put my swag and things like that on the back of the bike. I used an eBay seat pan, eBay seat springs, and I sort of created a seat pan with a custom bend and a tongue that goes down in underneath there that screws down and locks it all together and keeps it very rigid. Never actually even had to adjust it. I'm really happy with how that mounts at the front. And there's a couple of stock holes in the frame, crossbar, that I put these bolts through, ultimately to hold the back on, and it couldn't actually be more rigid. The seat itself is a Highway Hawk seat. I've used them before on a couple of different projects and they're absolutely great. They have the bait style look I'm after, but they are relatively cheap and they're quite durable, yet they are leather. So I really like that seat, and again, it just accentuates the look that I'm going for. It's got an old belt mounted between the fuel tank mounting points, just to sort of hide the fact that there's a big bracket there, but also you can use it to hold your gloves, and I think that just is a cool little detail. I have relocated the switches from the switch blocks up on the handlebars to the side covers, so this is actually the start button now, and I'll kick it into gear and start it for you shortly so you can hear it. But ultimately, just I've simplified the handlebars by moving all the switches to the right and left side of the bike. The tank itself is from eBay and I have let it rust. I did paint it with some clear coat, but I found that the clear coat itself flaked off pretty easily because the rust would sort of flake off. So I've actually sanded it back. These days I just use a mix of linseed oil and turpentine at a 50-50 mix to just treat the patina, the rust, every 12 months or so. And I find that just works so much better than trying to paint it, and just gives it that slightly darker, more natural look than if you clear coat it. I got that from Trojan Motorsports. They specialise in vintage bike. It's a vintage spark plug holder. It's designed for Triumphs and Versailles and things like that, but I loved the look of it, and I bought one to install on this bike. Again, just to sort of try and suit the error that I'm going for. It's pretty firmly mounted. I think you could move the bike. It's certainly not going to slip onto the tyre or anything dramatic like that. Just MGO cocktail shakers. They still have the baffles in them. I have run them without the baffles, and I find that it's annoyingly loud. It's quite raspy, so I run them with the baffles in just to quieten it down a little bit and make it a little bit more suitable for long distance. And over the years, I have ridden this bike more and more distance. I find it's quite comfortable. It's light, it's nimble. It's a really good bike to just take exploring. And with the gas box, Sissybar, which I bought from Lowbrow Customs in the US, gives me a lot of different mounting points for any luggage that I'd like to carry. Pillion seat was from eBay. It was brown leather, but I used some leather and vinyl dye to create a more black look. Up close, you can still see some of the brown coming through, and it's great. It just gives it that aged, distressed look. Just whip this up. Was just experimenting with things to make it look more 70s. It's just some feathers that I found that I bound together just to give it that sort of hippie 70s look. And again, I think it's cool, and most of this bike won't be for everyone, but I think it looks pretty cool and it suits the era of the bike that I'm going for. These are Oxford micro halogen indicators. They're quite expensive. I put them on the bike long before I discovered the ones from Super Cheap that are on my other bikes. They're about 3 times the price. They have gone the distance. They've lasted pretty well. They're bright. Because they're halogen, you don't have to put resistors on the bike, or you don't have to put diodes on the bike. I did attempt to go LED at one point on this bike, and it was an absolute nightmare. So I went back to the micro halogen and have never regretted it. And I've never actually really bothered to try going LED lights on a bike again because of the nightmare that it became. This is an A model brake light, tail light. That runs as the tail light. It does have the brake switches connected, so when you hit the brakes, this lights up. They're quite bright, they're LED, and it certainly is probably fairly legal because of the position it is in, up front in the face of drivers behind you. I think it looks really good. Again, it suits the era of the bike that I'm going for, and it certainly works better than having it down on the side. I don't need to hide the transfer case of the shaft drive on this bike with the number plate because I've got a Johnny Reb bag, which I'll show you in a second. This is the other side of the gas box Sissybar. That was one of the first genuine welding projects that I ever did, and I look back on it and it's relatively known. I'm actually relatively happy with it. There's certain points that I would do better on now, but I'm pretty happy with how it looks, and it suits the look of the bike that I'm going for. This mounts the long haul gas bottle, and because this is a 9-litre tank, gets about 120 to 140 kilometres range. I have bought this to mount. This is about 50 Australian dollars. I welded a plate onto the Sissybar and I've mounted it, and I've used some dome nuts just to cover up the screws. It's really great. I'm so happy with it. It's surprisingly durable. It's worked exceptionally well, and that's 5 litres. It gives me another 100 kilometres or so, which allows me to sort of basically find, on a small island like Tasmania, a servo pretty much anywhere. That's it locked in there. It's very rigidly mounted. If you take the time to screw it in properly, it's very rigidly mounted. I've had it on there for hundreds of kilometres and never had an issue with it. as far as motorcycles go, it's probably actually the best 50 bucks I've ever spent. I really actually can't speak more highly of it. Got a genuine leather Johnny Reb side bag, designed for Harley Sportsters more than anything else, but does mount up really nicely to the swing arm of the XVS650. Got a Vietnam era army bum bag. I use this to hold my Jetboil stove and this to hold spares. So ultimately just gives you a little extra range, gives you the ability to stop and have some coffee and have a snack, have a drink of water by sort of holding it in that US military side bag. And again, like anything on the bike, I'm attempting to go for a certain era, and I think that bum bag looks great and it suits that era that I'm going for. The rear mudguard I got from Mr. Mudguards. I welded on a bracket, I welded on a bolt underneath, so that these became captive nuts, which makes it a lot easier to get it apart, particularly on the side of the road. I've put some nylock nuts on everywhere so that the vibration doesn't vibrate it loose. These are actually Imperial because they came from the kit from America, but ultimately the bungs work. I've put some Loctite on them and I've never had an issue with it. I've never had to tighten them up. They are lock solid rigid. You can see I've mounted some tabs on each side of the frame. I welded them on to mount the Sissybar. I've cut a whole bunch of speed holes on the bike. This cover's really heavy, so I just used a hole saw to cut through it. I think it looks cool. I welded on a tab to side mount a speedometer. The speedo works absolutely. It's not the most accurate thing on the planet, but it certainly works. But the odometer gives me an idea of how far I've gone and where I need to refill. Before I had the long haul fuel bottle on the back, ultimately that was really important to make sure that I didn't run out of fuel. Put some knee pads on the tank, just had them laying around, and I think it just adds to the look of the bike. I do hold my knees up there pretty high, and so they do sort of ultimately give me the ability to grip the tank, particularly if I've got my feet on the highway pegs that I made. There's the other skate wheel. I drilled a hole through and I have used a self-tapper basically as a grub screw. And then this is just Selly's Knead It that I use to neaten it up and stop it moving side to side. I painted that Knead It black, and it's Selly's Knead It's just like JB World, and it ended up looking really good. I'm actually pretty happy with that. I have custom made a rod because ultimately I did have foot clutch hand shift on this bike. Absolutely hated it. I found that I couldn't ride the bike anywhere near as aggressively as I wanted to. I was always thinking about it. Looks great, it might be awesome if you're on the dead flat roads of California or Arizona or something like that. But around here, I found that it was more of a hindrance than anything else. So I went back to hand clutch foot shift, and I couldn't be happier because I'd modified a few of the bell cranks. I found that the stock rod didn't work particularly well, so I just custom made a rod, as you can see here, bent it slightly around the engine case, and it works no problem whatsoever. Here's the switches. So anything that was on the left switch block has been moved to the left side. Anything that was on the right switch block has been moved to the right side. So you've got indicators, you've got the light stack, and then you've got the horn. And I have scratched up the horn and patinaed it like the rest of the bike. Got a bandana hanging off the side just to hide some of that, and again, like the XVS1100, you either love peanut tanks on a V-Star or you hate them, because they sit right at the top of the dual backbone and ultimately they leave that gap here. I think it looks pretty cool, and I think it looks sort of slightly Frisco in its style, which was what I was going for with this bike, with it being a little bit taller and narrower than stock. But ultimately, you either love that gap or you hate that gap, or you learn to live with it. Up on the handlebars, these are 8-inch Z-bars from eBay. There's a 1-inch rise, stock rises, so 9-inch, perfect height for me. These are the stock cables, and they have fit perfectly. Haven't even really had to reroute them, to be honest. Got a single throttle, Amel style throttle from Trojan Motorsport on eBay, and some Coke bottle grips from Trojan Motorsport on eBay. This bike has a shocking clutch bite point right out here. So I've just bought these eBay adjustable levers to sort of bring the lever in a bit so that the bite point is here rather than out here on my hands, and it's worked really nicely. Under the tank, you've got velocity stacks, and it's been rejetted for those velocity stacks. It's got a crankcase breather hidden up underneath there as well. Stock, the airbox is quite big and bulky, and there's a lot that goes on underneath the tank of a V-Star, and that works really well. With the jetting, it runs superbly and it sounds great, and it just gives it a very slight uptick in the amount of power that it's got. This bike is not powerful, but it's certainly not heavy either, and I find it quite fun to ride. If you had to force me to pick between the 1100 and the 650 at gunpoint, I'd probably actually pick the 650 because it's a little bit more nimble and it's a lot lighter. It's less bulky, and for someone my size, it's really nice to ride. So it depends on what you're going to use them for, but I do really like the 650, particularly now that I've pulled a lot of stuff off it. Hidden in underneath here is a Dynatech ignition module, and that changes the timing and the advance, and again, it just gives it a very slight uptick in the amount of power, makes it sound pretty cool, and it's just something different. I got it secondhand from the US, but it was in near new condition. It was plug and play. If you're gonna buy one, ultimately I would not bother buying one for a stock bike. I would only put one on a bike that has a reasonable amount of modification. Otherwise, you're just wasting your money. But let's fire this bad boy up so you can hear it run. Guys, that's my XVS650 or V-Star 650. I absolutely love this bike. Hope you enjoyed the walk around. Again, they're pretty long videos, but I really hope you get something out of them. They've been going quite well on my channel, so I'd like to thank you guys for your support. These videos tend to come out on a Saturday, and then my build videos come out on Tuesday. So join me guys for the next video, either Saturday or Tuesday. My name's Chris, this is iRidetas. Support the channel by using super thanks below, or go to buymeacoffee.com/iRidetas. But guys, till I see you next time, have a great day. I'm out.